Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are. With Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is... yes.
With what ship? I'm taking mine.
You're going where, exactly? I've seen where they are.
So we go together. And see who gets to her first.
Soul lied to you. He blamed me. Soul never blamed you. He tried to teach me to accept that someone that I love could be capable of this level of destruction. We'll explain what Soul did. They'll have to...
Even after everything, you put your faith in the Jedi. I'll show when they find out how powerful you are.
You will meet the same fate as our mother.
He justified every selfish step with the love he had for your sister.
My sister?
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. I am your host, Dan Zehr, delighted to talk Star Wars with you. Since May 2013, I've been committed to creating a positive, family-friendly, spoiler-free place for our Star Wars community. Imagine walking into your favorite coffee shop and joining a lively discussion about Star Wars films, Disney Plus live action, animation, books, comics, collectibles, or Star Wars experiences at the Disney theme parks. I want to bring that sense of community to this podcast, my website, special events, live video experiences, email newsletter, and more. Join our Star Wars community at coffeewithkenobi.com and be part of something special. Thank you to the official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi, MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. Check out coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel for a no-cost, no-obligation quote and let them know Coffee with Kenobi and Dan Zehr sent you. And don't forget to sign up for your no-cost, no-obligation quote to join me and members of the Coffee with Kenobi community on the Disney Wish June 16th to 20th, 2025. You can find out more about that amazing experience at coffeewithkenobi.com/DisneyWish. On today's show, James Burns of Jedi News and I talk about the finale of The Acolyte, the 8th episode, which is titled, by the way, The Acolyte. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi. Before we jump into the actual show itself, I want to remind you, as I announced this week on CWK Live, next Tuesday night, July 23rd, will be the last episode of CWK Live. This has been an amazing experience for me over the past 4 years of doing the live video every week. I enjoyed it so very much, but all things have an ending. Now, there will be some occasional live events and pop-ups that will come up from time to time. But for the foreseeable future, CWK Live, the weekly live show that I've been doing since the quarantine actually, is going to come to an end officially on July 23rd. So I hope as many of you can join us on July 23rd at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time at coffeewithkenobi.com/live so we can send off that version of the show in style. The regular podcast, Coffee with Kenobi, will still come to you every week just as it has since 2013. Now, on to the show. Here we are, friends. It is time to discuss the finale of The Acolyte, the 8th episode, titled appropriately enough, The Acolyte. And joining me, he's no acolyte. He is a grand master in his own right, the legendary James Burns of Jedi News. James, welcome back to the show.
Thank you again for having me. This has been a huge journey, and we have to make sure that we don't wait so long to do this again together.
I agree. Again, as I've said, the best part about The Acolyte for me has been being able to talk about this with you. Every single week. You've been my co-host, and I've learned from you. We've had some laughs. We've shed some tears. And I think that's appropriate for this episode. So let's just jump right into it. Give me one word to describe your opinions on the finale and overall thoughts.
One word. So when I watched it the first time, the word was redemption. I've watched it again today, and I think the word is lies. So it's a mixture between both of those words, redemption and lies.
And overall thoughts?
Overall, I actually liked the episode. I thought it was one of the strongest episodes so far that we've seen. Well, one of the strongest episodes of the season. I like some of the surprises. I like some of the twists, some of the turns. There are still some things that bother me, but and I was thinking about this today. Pretty much every Disney Plus show that we've seen, there have been things that bother me. I don't think there's anything that, maybe with the exception of the first season of The Mandalorian, that came along and sort of like ticked every single box and I was completely happy with. So we're never going to be completely happy. I think that's very, very difficult to do. There are so many of us with so many things and so many boxes to tick. Mm-hmm. And nothing is going to live up to our expectations of A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back and Jedi. And it's just not. But that's not a negative thing. I think there are still so many positives to take away. And I love the way that the story has moved further forward and how it's interacting and touching on the events in episode 1. And there is a lot here to like. But there are issues.
You said a lot there that I really liked. It makes you think. And I think that's one of the things I've appreciated about the Acolyte. This series has made me think. It is definitely, look, there are very few narratives that I think are perfect. As you said, it's impossible to please everyone. You should never try to do that, by the way. Whether you're telling a story or living your life, that's impossible to do. All right. This has been, my word for the episode is going to be polarizing.
Okay.
Because whether it's in fandom, online, in person, or the show itself, or even with the characters in the show, it's been really polarizing. And I'm good with that. Because I like the conversation. I like that it doesn't check all the boxes. I like that it kind of does its own thing. I also have watched this twice. The first time I watched it, my word probably would have been, I don't even know what my word for the first time I do it would be, but it's definitely polarizing. There are some things that really satisfy me. And I'm going to start with something, because I like what we did last week, where we did stuff where we added some cream and sugar to our coffee and sweetened it up. And then some stuff that maybe made the coffee a little more bitter through the second half. So we'll stick to that. I think it worked very, very well. The first thing I want to say about it is, you know what? I'm not going to go first. You're my guest. You're my guest. I want to hear what you have to say first. Tell something that really worked for you, that you really liked, that added some sweets to your hot beverage.
Okay. Well, I loved seeing Plagueis. I think.
Are we officially? Is it official, or is it just? It sure as heck seems that way, because it does seem that way to me.
It is. Obviously. It has. Who else is it going to be?
Yeah,
exactly. So it has to be Plagueis, and I think seeing him in a real live action show, Star Wars show, is amazing. And bearing in mind that some of that was thrown away because of Legends, so I think seeing that being included here is a huge plus point. And it's going to be interesting to see how the dynamic changes, because there can only be 2. So we know that Plagueis lives on, and we know who Plagueis' apprentice is from episode 1. Mm-hmm. So there's a huge story to tell here, because obviously the Stranger and Osha can't live. They can't continue to be. So what happens to them? What's their story? How does that all play out over the next 100 years or over the next 50 years as Palpatine is, taken under Plagueis' wings, as it were?
He's probably not even born yet, probably.
Yeah, probably not. So there's a lot to tell. And I'm really fascinated by that. And I'm fascinated by his inclusion. And I think many of us have wondered whether or where he was, or whether there was other Sith potentially that we didn't know about. So it's really interesting that they've made this firm commitment to using the character. And there's a lot there that I would like to know about, how he cheats death, how he does some of the things that he does. So I think there's a lot for Star Wars fans potentially to find out about if the show gets a second season, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But there's a lot there. So I really enjoyed seeing that character. I really enjoyed seeing Yoda at the end. I think that was really interesting that Venestra obviously felt that she needed, I believe, to confess, and she was going to Yoda to explain everything that's gone on. Maybe Yoda isn't aware of exactly what happened on Brandok 16 years ago, so maybe she's going to confess everything, which she needs to do because the Jedi have a huge problem here, and they need to deal with the fact that they've tried to cover something up for 16 years.
I'm going to talk about that the second half of the show.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine. I have
So
an
you're-
issue with that too. Yeah, no, I do.
Yeah,
But so I think Plagueis and Yoda are huge ticks here.
Yeah, so the cameos.
Yeah.
Plagueis first, assuming it is Plagueis. It sure, as you said, it sure seems to be him. If that is him, he looks spectacular.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that Neil Scanlon did, or if that's purely ILM, or maybe it's a mixture of both. But I actually said out loud, "Dude," that was my reaction when I saw him, and that is thrilling. And that would make sense based on the story they have told us, because if these two characters, Osha and May, are virginses in the Force, right? And it happens on this planet. We even see the tree that the two reunite at before May's mind is wiped. The way that grows and flourishes based on the other things around it would line up with other trees we have seen in Star Wars. So I like that visual of that. It's a pretty compelling, pretty nice thing to do. So if he is, again, trying to learn how to cheat death still, which of course he passes on to Palpatine, the fact that life was created on this planet and these two twins are one entity split into two people, of course Plagueis will be interested in that. So it's very, very interesting. It's a new way to kind of approach this, and I think it's fascinating. I do.
And there's so many stories to tell, and it opens everything wide open. Sorry, that sounded crazy. Everything becomes wide open with Plagueis' involvement because it's going to tell us and lead to so many stories, and it's something that everyone that read those novels, years and years ago, wanted to know more. The line in the opera scene between Anakin and Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith, where they're talking about cheating death and Plagueis, and there's so many questions that opens up, and it seems like there may be an opportunity here to get some answers.
Yes, and I do want to go on record as saying I'm very good, and I'm sure you would probably agree with this. I'm very good with not having answers to everything.
Of course.
I think no matter how satisfying it was executed and filmed and performed, I still would have been okay with not knowing how Boba Fett got out of the Sarlacc pit. It would have been kind of cool to just have to have your imagination with that. But we'll see. We shall see. The first one I want to talk about is, look, the first time I watched this episode, I gasped. I was frustrated. I thought, oh gosh, there are some things that I just don't understand. I understand the story and the logic behind the story, but some things just I didn't connect with. So I watched it again, and I had to tell myself, look, Dan Zehr, I don't actually talk to myself like that, but it just sounds funny on a podcast. Listen, this is the story they're telling. Get on board. Embrace what they're trying to do. Try to understand the logic of what Leslie Headland and the creators of the Acolyte are saying, and go with it. So I did. And I gave a standing ovation. Bravo. Everything that they set out, all the plot points and the beats from the beginning, they came to a full fruition. There were some twists. There was some flipping of ideas. But it made sense in the context of the story they were trying to tell.
Yeah. Agreed.
And it was very well executed. Executed is probably an apt term, unfortunately. But they did what they set out to do. They didn't really leave any plot points dangling. Although I still don't think the tracker had any purpose besides being cute. But we'll get to that later. So based on that alone, tremendous, absolutely tremendous. and dare I say brave in what they were trying to do, and it landed. They nailed the landing, right? We're getting ready for the Olympics, so that they nailed this landing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's what she set out to do. Look, I've been very fortunate. I've spoken to her 3 times in the last 7 weeks.
That's right.
And
I told you last week that you get a chance to talk to her again, and you did.
I know. And she is so passionate about Star Wars. She knows her Star Wars. She is a huge, huge fan. She can talk about any era, whether it be the prequels, the original trilogy, or the sequels. She knows her stuff. And I believe she really, really cares passionately about this.
And that's what we want.
Yeah, which is exactly what we want. Okay, we want those sort of people making us Star Wars. And I think the story was brave. The execution was fairly good. I'd like to spend the sort of money that she spent on the show does seem an awful lot. However, I think the sets and the music and the cast were incredible. Yes, we've got issues with some of the way that some of the characters are portrayed. We always do. It's very, very difficult for everyone to pull it off. But I think her intent was there. I think we just said off air that the show could have done with the script doctor. But dialogue
that's more of a second half.
Okay. But I just wanted to say that, dialogue in Star Wars films hasn't always been top notch. George has been criticized for that himself. And there were moments in here where, I do think that some of the dialogue was a bit clunky and we did need a bit more exposition. But
we're not going to get it. Yeah.
No, we're not going to get it. But I like for the most part, I like the story that's been told. Yes, I've got some issues with it. We will talk about those. But she is incredibly passionate about what she's done and what she wants to do with Star Wars. She's prepped out 3 or 4 seasons of the show.
In terms of
and in terms of key moments and key things that she wants to hit. And I think that's a pretty brave thing to do.
It is. It's cool. It's ambitious.
Yeah.
We want a vision. We want a direction. What's the next thing you'd like to talk about that really worked for you?
Well, one of the standout things, and I know we've touched on it briefly, but the music has been absolutely incredible throughout the whole
Michael
series.
Abels, is that the name?
Yeah. And I have to say, the music here, the violin moments when that came in between Osha and May towards the end, and at the end of the show, and I just wonder whether that was Amandla herself doing that, because we know that she is a violin player. So I'm just wondering whether she did that. I guess we'll find out over the next few days whether that was her or not. But I just think the way that the cues have been picked up by Michael have been really, really strong, and I've been really impressed.
Especially the ending.
Yeah,
when they're standing on that rock together, and
I mean that's a really pivotal sort of Star Wars moment. It sort of reminded me of the end of Empire Strikes Back when you've got Luke and Leia standing together, looking out in space with the droids. It's sort of
Or Attack of the Clones with Anakin and Padme.
Yes, true.
Looking at as they just got married.
With the droids. Yeah. So there were some nice things there, and I thought the music was absolutely incredible.
Wait, is this the first Star Wars series we've seen where there's no astromechs?
Pretty much, yeah.
Were there any astromechs in Andor?
There were, yes, there were.
There were. I don't remember seeing astromech in Andor, but so how interesting! I never thought. I just not that that's important, but it's interesting. No. Bit of trivia.
Why not?
Why not? My next one is. Let's talk about the visuals. I think the sequence when they're going to Brendok and Sola's chasing May, and they're going through, I guess it's like an asteroid field, or I don't really know what. It's not an asteroid field, but whatever is going on there space-wise.
I think it's been described as like rings around the planet.
Sure, like Saturn or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it was gorgeous. It was some of the most beautiful space visual effects I've ever seen in any medium. It was absolutely stunning. I watched that and I thought, this is art. This is cinema. This is art. This is absolutely gorgeous. It's a masterclass. And if all the money was spent on just that scene, it's worth it because it looked just spectacular. And this is something I'm going to talk about the second half of the show too. But let's talk about the things that worked. Seeing a kyber crystal bleed and seeing this lightsaber turn from blue to red. I said to Mason, because he only watched the last 10 minutes of the episode.
Okay.
That's all I've seen of the Acolyte. And he said, Dad, I don't know what's going on, but that little guy's cute. That was what he said. But that was so cool. That was so cool. That is what I wanted in Revenge of the Sith.
Yes.
When Anakin was fighting Obi-Wan, I wanted that blue lightsaber turn red. But at that point, there was no kyber crystal bleeds because I think that didn't happen until it was a comic book. Yeah, was it Charles Soule Vader? I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. So that didn't exist. Yeah, it would have been cool to have it like that, but it didn't. So, what we saw there visually was great.
Yeah, I love the way that they honed in on the blue crystal and the broken blue crystal, and then how it all. I mean, that was done really well, and
it was gorgeous.
Yeah, ILM did some really amazing work this episode.
Mm-hmm. I agree. What's your next one?
My next one is going to be the fighting, because they obviously they borrowed a lot from this, from The Matrix, from
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Exactly. And but nevertheless, I think it worked incredibly well, and I loved some of the sort of homages that it paid to the Anakin and Obi-Wan fight from Revenge of the Sith when they're sort of in that bridge. I was, because they basically strike through the whole bridge, and I wondered whether the bridge was going to collapse at one point.
Yeah,
whether that was
cut right through it.
Yeah. So, but it didn't. I don't know whether that was an effect that they didn't include, potentially. If we ever get a chance to talk to Leslie, I will ask her.
You'll probably talk to her tomorrow. Do you have her on speed dial at this point?
Not yet. I'm getting to that point. I'm trying. I did. Okay. So what I did, I was offered one more question last week. So the one more question last week was, can we do this again next week? And she said yes. But she said it's not down to me, it's down to her agent. So I have emailed the agent, and I have said, Leslie said that she would, so could we? So, but I haven't heard, but I thought I'd try.
Yes.
It costs nothing to try.
That's right.
So we'll see whether we get an opportunity to talk to her this week, but here's hoping. So, because I love that. I thought the way that they did that, and the way that they were, even when there was another point when Osha and May were going through the sort of exhaust tunnel at the bottom of the witch's coven, and she was sucked into that in the same way that Luke was sucked into that one on Bespin. So I liked some of those little nods, but the fighting was just incredible.
That was going to be my next one. So I'll talk about it. Yes, it was amazing. No, don't be. I think I'm honored to have the same thought process as you. It was spectacular. Are you kidding me? It was so amazing. In like the visuals and the stunt work, and it was just splendid. It was absolutely splendid. It's that sequence deserves an Emmy for fight choreography, because it's gorgeous. It's absolutely stunning. Full use of the medium, full use of the technology, fully embracing the abilities of someone strong in the Force, whether they're light or dark side. Mm-hmm. I couldn't have loved that more. I wrote down a list. Of course, we do our top fives on CWK Live, and so far 1, 2, 3, I have like 9 of my top fives. Usually, I just nail it to 5, whatever. So I'm going to narrow it down. Obviously, maybe I'll expand, because next week, as I said at the top of the show, and on CWK Live this week, next week, the 23rd, is the last CWK Live that I'm going to do. So this is a good one to kind of go out on a bang with. Yeah.
Why is your last one?
You know what? It's just time. I started it during the pandemic. And as much as I love it, I'd rather it's a lot of work to do this and the regular show. And I'd rather put my eggs in other baskets. I've got other things that I'm working on. But more than any of that, I would really this is a really great time. It's always a great time to be a family man, but I really want to spend that extra night every evening with my family. I don't want to miss any of those good things. And there will be occasional live shows that will pop up on occasion. And of course, Coffee with Kenobi is not going anywhere, but
absolutely
no. So everyone is still stuck with me.
Yay. Great news for Star Wars fandom.
Oh, that's very kind. So I don't know that I have too many more things I'm good to talk about that work. Is there anything else that you would like to add? Just pile them on. Anything?
Yeah, in terms of really positive things, I love some of the Senate, some of the Senate stuff. I love seeing all of the different Senate members, and I thought their attire was incredible, and the detail that went into some of that, and the characters. I'd love to know who all those characters were. I love scenes like that, and for me, it sort of touched on Andor at that point because there was. You could see those scenes being in Andor too. And I really like that. I liked some of that political intrigue, and we can sometimes get too much of that, but I enjoyed it. I thought it worked well. Obviously there is a couple of senators that are gunning for the Jedi, which always makes for interesting
What's the name
viewing
of
and
the
intrigue.
senator that's the chief
Senator
instigator?
Rayancourt.
Rayancourt. I love him.
Yeah.
He is awesome. He's one of the
Very
most
much.
compelling characters. I wish we got more of him in every episode. He is fabulous.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that we see more of that story, because obviously there is some worry that the Jedi aren't necessarily doing what they should be doing. And he seems to want to challenge them. And I think that's a positive thing.
I do too. Rayancourt was a great addition to this cast. The performance was excellent. I looked in the credits several times. I didn't see him listed anywhere. They didn't have a character list.
Oh, really?
I mean, it's very possible I missed it. Because the second half of the credits, the font is so small, which is very unusual.
Yeah,
it was hard to kind of piece out. So maybe there was something there that I didn't have my spectacles on, so I couldn't see. But interesting stuff.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Now, this is the part of the show, like we did last week, where this is the stuff our cream and sugar have run out. So we're just going to talk about the things that didn't work as well, that we didn't connect to. And there's actually another word I had that to make it less negative. So I think you can be critical and you can criticize without being negative. And I hope that's how these have come across. I've received nothing but positive feedback about the honesty we've used to approach this, because it may not connect or land for all of us, but it doesn't have to, as you so eloquently said at the beginning. What are some things that didn't work for you?
Basil. Why? I understand why he was used as a tracker early on. Makes complete sense. But a couple of episodes ago, he was squirting oil in May's face and having a go at May. And this time, he's trying to let May get away. So I don't understand that character's motivation, what he's trying to do. He's a complete pain in the backside. And if I was a Jedi, I would probably have restrained him before I restrained May.
He disconnects the, I don't know what it was, the power or something like that. So Soul couldn't pursue. There was never, if you suddenly started connecting with May and sympathizing with her, that wasn't as stated or presented in any way, shape, or form, both when it's with Soul here or it's when it's with May a couple episodes before. After he does what he does as an instigator, then they just act like he doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And they don't even address it. And he disappears. It made no sense. Narratively, he served no function at all.
There was one throwaway line from Mog who basically turned around and said, "Oh, I'm glad you survived." And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. I like the character's inclusion.
Action figure moment to me.
Yeah. I like the inclusion of him to search originally. I think that made a lot of sense. But beyond that, doesn't really do a lot for me.
No.
And a waste of a character. Unless we're going to get action figures and things, but
which of course we will.
Please don't. Okay.
Oh, come on. You know it's
actually a cute character. He is a cute character. Yeah, he's a cute character.
Yeah, he's very cute. The performance is great, but narratively there was no function of any kind.
Yeah, no, I agree.
The main thing that didn't work for me was Oh, this is a lot. This is a lot to process. As we've said before, Star Wars for nearly 50 years has been about hope and optimism. There is no hope in this episode or the series. Master Soul, the only character that I think we could authentically connect with, was shown to be incredibly flawed. The performance was outstanding.
Agreed.
Yeah. Absolutely outstanding. His emotions were so authentic. Soul's emotions were so authentic. At the end, what do we learn about the Jedi? The Jedi are deceitful. The Jedi lie to cover their tracks.
Yep.
The Jedi are incredibly selfish. Even at the end, Vernestra, finally we see some emotion over someone who has died. She clearly had emotion for him. I was very glad to see that. And when I watched the second time, I had a very hard time watching what happened to Soul.
Yep.
How he was killed. I really struggled with that. I thought that was so upsetting to watch because of the emotional weight, and especially as he's about trying to say that he loves her and she kills him. I guess now we see why this weird plot device of you have to kill someone without a lightsaber. I don't know why they didn't just say at the beginning, hey, use the Force to choke somebody. But maybe they want you to that just sort of happen organically. I guess that's sort of a new concept. But the fact that Vernestra all the way through this lies and then making it 5 billion times worse, and my math may be off, but to me it's 5 billion times worse. The whole galaxy has to know that he went crazy and he killed himself. The most I don't even know how to explain it, but what suicide is so horrible in real life, and it doesn't carry with it any sort of honor. And he's a Jedi that deserved honor and respect because he was a Jedi master. And she says, so she whispered to him sorry when he's dead, and the whole galaxy has to know that he killed himself, so she can cover her errors that she's had for all this time. And then at the end, when she goes to confess to Yoda, that completely fell flat for me. I love seeing Yoda. That made me smile, but he didn't talk, and that's fine. It's a cameo. But I don't believe for 1 second that she's going to tell him the truth. Or if she is, do you think Yoda's going to keep that a secret? Absolutely not. I don't believe that for 1 second. So that cameo was inauthentic to me. It just bugs me so much how they I hate explaining it this way, but they did Soul dirty. I think he deserved better. They wanted a flawed Jedi. They sure got one. That's why I meant for Bravo. They nailed the landing. They did what they wanted to do with him, and it worked. But the fact that he's a scapegoat and they make it so much worse because they let everyone think he committed suicide, that crushes me. I don't like that. I don't like that story choice. It worked for what they're trying to do, but I just didn't. It just really bummed me out.
Look, this story is obviously telling, essentially, we're learning about the Sith ascension to the throne and the Sith becoming public again, whereas they've always hidden and they haven't been around for years and years and years.
A millennia, we're told.
Yeah. And
so
now
they're hiding the existence of the Sith too.
Correct. And now we're learning that they're there behind the scenes and that they are regrouping and they're learning and they're, finding out how to do things, finding out how to come back or how to stay alive, how to cheat death. So we're learning all of this. So there's no hope there. There really isn't, because this isn't the story of Luke and redemption and all of that sort of stuff. This is really the ascension of the Sith. It's that story, or the beginnings of that story. So I get why there's no hope. And as I said before, and you said, it's a very brave story to tell.
And very dark.
It's very dark. It's very negative. But it's a story. And it fits within the Star Wars universe. And it makes sense. It does make sense. But I agree. I don't like the way that they've thrown a Jedi that we've come to know and respect and like under the bus. But then she had to blame somebody. She had to turn it around.
But
and if
she
she
didn't.
turned around,
She should have just owned it and let the consequences fall. That's the right thing to do. And if you're in the light, it's unforgivable.
I agree.
I didn't like it.
We said last week that why did Indara, when she had an opportunity to explain to Osha what had gone on, she could have told Osha the truth. She could have dealt with that. She could have explained that Soul reacted by mistake, or the whole thing was, an accident and they never meant to kill the mother. But instead, she perpetuated this lie that then the other three Jedi had to then move forward with. And they obviously lived with that for 16 years. But she didn't have to do that, but she chose to do that. So by doing that, that's sort of where we are. And that's this story, I guess.
Kiadi Mundi in The Phantom Menace is the Sith have been extinct for millennia. No one bats an eye. To me, Vernestra's, I don't know what happens to Vernestra by the Phantom Menace, but that secret must die with her because it's apparently her Padawan. That's why the stranger puts that helmet back on so she can't sense him anymore.
And there's a story there as well, obviously.
Oh, big time. That's a pretty interesting story that I would like to. I'm curious to see how that plays out. But so if you want to say now that line in the Phantom Menace doesn't work, I disagree. It does work if Vernestra doesn't tell Yoda.
Correct.
If she does tell Yoda, then Yoda is a part of this whole conspiracy too. And then I'm going to throw a red flag and say no, unacceptable.
Yeah. I agree. But we don't know what she's going to tell Yoda, and I don't believe she's going to tell Yoda everything.
I don't think what is she going to tell him?
I don't know.
That, you know what I mean? I feel like, hey, guess what? These things happen, but she should have told him before she told the Senate.
She will probably, this is a complete guess, she will probably say that the twins, or May and Osha,
could be,
and she'll just blame it on the two of them. That's what I think she'll do, and she won't mention the stranger, because if she omits that line, then it is what it is. Then,
by definition of what George said, selfish versus selfless, and that she's in the dark side, which is not the Vernestra that we've met in the literature.
No. So it's going to be interesting to hear what she says to Yoda.
What is your opinion on what I said about Soul? How did that bother you creatively that that's what they did?
I think to build somebody up and then to tear them down is a horrible thing to do. But I understand that they needed a scapegoat, because if the only other thing that they could have done, well, I think the Senate would have come down more heavily on the Jedi. Well, obviously, if she told the truth, then the galaxy is in turmoil because you've got potentially two Sith running around, and she certainly didn't want to say that. So she had to come up with a story that was plausible to the Senate that they would accept. And she knew the minute she saw Soul laying on that ground, she knew what she was going to do. She went over and apologized to his dead corpse and said, so she knew what she was going to do.
That's a lot like apologizing to a fish that you didn't throw back after you've swallowed it.
Agreed. But she knew what she was going to do.
Yeah, she did. And if the point was twofold to show how evil can make someone a scapegoat and take away their good name, that's a pretty frightening concept, and it's a pretty evil thing to do. So in many ways, Vernestra is no better.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
So she is, that's a problem.
Look, the two Jedi that I have most issues with over this whole series in terms of the course of events are Indara and Vernestra.
Absolutely.
Those two are lying, hiding, cheating. It was the other word that I came up with before, which was lies. Between the two of them, they've changed the course of what's going on here. And if they'd come out and been honest at the start, if Indira hadn't covered up, things would be so different.
Here's my concern. Okay. It saddens me. Because what is the message here? As an English teacher, how could I not look for a message in this? A good story has a message, right? But is lying portrayed as an acceptable option? Is lying portrayed as, look, sometimes you have to lie. Sometimes you have to keep key events. Oh, there's a sense of omission and commission. There are key events. You have to cover yourself up because in your mind it's for the greater good. Lying is never good. Lying is never acceptable. That flies in the face culturally or spiritually, whatever you believe. I find it hard to believe that anyone, and this isn't even being altruistic. I find it hard to believe that someone would authentically say, yeah, you should lie. It's dishonest. So the Jedi are supposed to be, again, the pinnacle, the peak of compassion, of decency, of light and life. Yep. Lying flies in the face of that. So there's no character that you can hang your hat on and say, this is the person I root for. This is the hero of the series. There is no hero in this series.
No.
And this is a Star Wars series, James, as you know.
Yep.
And that saddens me. That saddens me.
But I think that's the whole premise of the show.
It is.
So, but there is a lesson here. There is a lesson for your students. And the lesson is, if you tell a lie, this is how it manifests itself.
Right. Do you think it's portrayed that way, or do you think it's shown as acceptable? As an acceptable alternative option?
No, because we're seeing the way Vanestra and Indara, before she was killed, what they're doing is covering things up and not facing up to the events that have happened. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a lesson that we all have to face, because you have to face these things and you have to deal with the action, your actions, your potential actions. If they're dealt with it, chances are, yes, Osha would have been furious, but they could have explained that the way that Soul ignited, the mothers were turning against the Jedi. They had to defend themselves, and they could have explained that. Yes, maybe they shouldn't have encroached on their space, but then that's what the Jedi are there to do. The Jedi have a right to do that throughout the universe. Mm-hmm. So they could have sat down with Osha and explained that. She wouldn't have been happy with it, but then as we learn, she was never happy with the fact that her mother got killed. That was what stopped her from becoming a Jedi. So either way, there were issues. So maybe had they faced that, had they told the truth, then things would be very, very different. It wouldn't have changed the way that May then turns up 16 years later looking for revenge. That wouldn't have changed. It wouldn't have changed the Stranger's actions. It wouldn't have changed what Plagueis had done. But there would have been nothing hidden.
True. I like your interpretation, and I want to feel the way that you feel. Perhaps another viewing in some time may shed some light on that for me. I don't know how I feel. I don't know if that is how it was communicated. I don't know. I think it wasn't shown as good, but it was also shown as the only option, especially because of the ending with Yoda, how it was ambiguous. Because again, if she tells him, then this lie stops there. But she's not going to tell him. So that to me shows us like, look, it wasn't a great idea, but this is what I did. So we don't have a hero in a Star Wars story.
Yep.
Doesn't that's hard for me to get on board with.
It is, but if you were somebody that rooted for the other side, you'd be cheering at this point.
Isn't that scary though?
It is scary, but
yeah.
But
you're right.
Look at it. Look at it from the other side. Look at it from the Sith side. They're getting stronger. The Stranger Kimar has managed to persuade May to come over to the dark side, and she's embraced that. So from their point of view, things look up.
Yeah. So I guess it is called the Acolyte. Yeah. I guess they weren't trying to pretend like it was anything else.
Correct.
That's why a Dungeons and Dragons campaign with all evil characters is hard to run. Maybe I'm just not meant to. Maybe I'm just not to be the DM for this.
Look. I think everything we've ever had in Star Wars has always been based on hope, and has always been looking to the positive. This is the first time that a series has come along called The Acolyte. It's done pretty much what it set out to do.
It does say what it says, yeah.
And it is telling the story from the other side. So at this point, if you're rooting for that other side, whoa, go Sith. But it's true.
Yeah, you're right.
It's their story. It's their story.
Right. You're right.
It isn't a story of hope. Hope's not mentioned in the title.
No, it's not.
It's looking at it from the other side of the coin, and they're growing. They're getting stronger. There's, we've got Plagueis watching over these two. Plagueis has probably encouraged him to take on an apprentice. He doesn't necessarily know what's going to happen yet because of the rule of two. I think it's fascinating, and we're learning and seeing it from the other side.
It is fascinating. I'm uncomfortable with it,
and we should be.
I think I am supposed to be.
Yes, I think we're all supposed to be uncomfortable with it because we don't want to see the Sith succeed.
No, we don't. What's another thing that didn't work for you?
I didn't like the use of the Jedi. When Vernestra says, and again it's Vernestra, go and gather as many Jedi Knights as you can without raising suspicion. And then you bring these Jedi Knights along and she tells them to create a perimeter, and then suddenly they're all chasing after the little Basil again.
Yeah.
So I didn't like that. I understand
use the Jedi to lie. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So I didn't like that.
Let's just talk about Vernestra. I've said so many times, and I'll try not to repeat myself. She's one of my favorite characters in the High Republic, the literature of the High Republic. In this, I've tried. I shouldn't have to try to like a character because apparently she's going to be the lead because everyone else is dead, and May doesn't remember anything. Osha has completely turned.
Yeah,
maybe. So that is. I just don't. This is one of the most unconventional stories that I've ever studied, and I've studied a lot of stories.
Yep.
As a teacher, as a fan, as a connoisseur of popular culture and fiction, this is it's hard for me because, and by the way, that super cool whip, I told you that was it, and that was pointless.
Wow.
They had so many chances to use it, they don't. Vernestra is not a character I'm remotely interested in because
going down in my estimation.
She was flat, and she went down in my estimation because she was just as duplicitous as the rest of them, and she let her dear friend that she loved let everyone think he committed suicide. And that isn't love. That's horrible. That to me, that's evil. And I was just disappointed with Vernestra. I really was. Everything about it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. She might be the same character that we see in the High Republic, but we're seeing a very different side to her here, and I don't like the side that we're seeing to her.
No, that's a pretty extreme. Yeah. It would be like learning that because I don't know, Captain America's an apt comparison as the way Vernestra is, but I don't know. That's a hard one for me to swallow.
Yeah.
My next one is the Kyber crystal thing. While the visual is great and it was so well executed, so well done, that was great. But if memory serves, in the comics, a guy named Darth Sidious or Darth Vader or Kylo Ren, who is not a Sith, but is very, very, very strong in the dark side. These characters, when they corrupt the Kyber crystal and make it bleed, because that's how Kyber crystals get red, they're in essence killing the life connection of it. She did it easily, with minimal effort. Maybe it was a ton of effort to it.
Yeah, we don't know.
But I guess I don't know. I don't really like being that person that complains about power levels because I've never understood that in other things. So please forgive me, people who did like this part. But that kind of made me like. Narratively, it was gorgeous, and I guess it's sort of a dumb thing for me to even complain about. But it is something that hit my radar.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Because if it's easy for her, then Palpatine should be able to do it while without even thinking.
Yeah, I don't screw with you. And we've never. I think part of the problem with that is that we've never seen it on screen before,
Sure.
and we would expect to have seen other characters use it or do it. That's never happened.
Anakin would have did it.
Well, let's assume that Anakin did do it, but we never saw it. If that makes sense.
Right.
So
because we see Vader do it in the comics, but maybe it's I mean, it's supposed to be all connected, but maybe that's unfair.
But I think that's part of the problem is that it was something that was, that's relatively new to the canon, and it's because it's never been used before on screen. To see it here for the first time is probably a little jarring because we would have expected to have seen it in other places.
Right.
So
cinematically, it was gorgeous.
Yeah,
it was incredibly cool.
Yeah, I'll let them have it on that basis if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. The other part of it that is connected is Soul's death was very troubling for me. Very upsetting. The whole point from the beginning, and I do give him credit for this. They said you got to kill, and I asked Leslie Headland about this when I got to talk to her. What's up with this? That's not how I said it, but what is the deal with you got to kill a Jedi without a weapon? Now it makes sense why. It's a pretty brave thing to do. But seeing this man again that I really enjoyed, his flaws were so apparent and bad. But if he would have gotten atoned for that, great. But that wasn't the point. He was supposed to die. But the fact he's about to say "I love you" and then he's killed, you could almost say was Shakespearean in the tragic, horribly tragic nature of it. But it was very disturbing to me and very unsettling. And that's not a bad thing as far as them telling the story. There's my previous criticisms has been about how the story is told. This was told the way it was supposed to be told, but I just want to go on record saying it was very disturbing to me. I know it was supposed to be, but it just stunk. It just stunk. I really like that character.
Yeah, it was. I think it was deliberate, and it was definitely supposed to. And I think anybody that doesn't come away feeling that is
that's a problem of a different sort.
Problem. Yeah,
and then the fact that everyone has to think he committed suicide because his mind was twisted from holding on to these lies.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, he might be the most tragic character in the history of Star Wars, more than Anakin, maybe, because at least Anakin gets to be redeemed.
Correct.
That stunk. That hurt me. That hurt me.
The bit that didn't make a lot of sense for me was when they brainwashed May, because why couldn't have May just gone along with them? May could have made them food.
Because they said she could have tricked them. Oh, I see what you mean. Stayed with them.
Yeah, she could have stayed.
Because they would be hunting. Maybe they thought she would help throw them on a wild goose chase.
Maybe. But it made sense with what they did with her in the end, I guess. And there's going to be more stories to tell there. But part of me thought she could have just gone with them, and that would have been fine. And then the sisters could have stayed together. But then maybe two's company, three's a crowd.
Exactly. Did it bother you? How easily he was able to erase her mind?
Yes. That happened far too quickly.
But maybe that's just part of, again, if I don't want to complain about how power in the rules of science and fiction work in a science fantasy, then I guess I can't be bothered by that. But I at least was aware that seemed pretty simple for a very hard thing to do. Yeah. I mean, Professor X would have had a hard time with that.
Yeah. It did seem like a hard thing to do, and to do it as quickly as he did in seconds, literally in seconds, seemed a bit bizarre. But maybe it's more of a block than an erasure, if that makes sense.
Because he does say permanently.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he can do it.
Yeah. And does it mean that he can't undo it? I don't know. But
not if it's permanent, I guess.
No, agreed. It was very, very quick. It was.
I don't even remember whose turn it is. Is it your turn or my turn?
I don't know.
I don't either. I only have one more.
Go on. What's your last one?
So the end. So if you're a person who likes shipping characters, then you're in heaven. You're in absolute paradise. It shows how flawed May is. We were supposed to, not May, Osha. It shows how flawed Osha is in this, because what happens at the end, there's a couple things that really are cool. When she goes to shake the stranger's hand to agree to be his apprentice, which I thought was sort of a strange way to say you agree, but then he hands her the Sith lightsaber. That was cool. That was a nice transition. As was the scene when Osha and May go to kick each other, and all of a sudden it transitions to the lightsabers between the stranger and soul clashing. That was a beautiful transition.
It was really was.
But at the end, they're standing out there, they're looking under the water. There's mountains on either side. The water is violent and crashing, very much showing visually and with nature. Things are off balance. This is a rocky, literally rocky relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really beautiful metaphor. But the fact that it's very new in the world of Star Wars, the way he's going to train her apparently is going to involve a little bit of seduction or something to that effect, because there's like a romantic thing, or at least there's some sort of a kinetic energy between them. And again, for some people that this is just the best. For me, that's just not where my fandom is. It doesn't have to be where my fandom is. It doesn't matter what I think. I just say I'm not the audience for that. It's an interesting choice, a bold choice. It is not something I connected with. Again, doesn't have to.
Yeah. No,
but I was like, wow, they have done what they wanted to do. So kudos for that.
Look, but that's the whole seduction thing is part of the dark side. And
it is. We never thought of it in terms of sexuality.
Correct. So I think so it worked for that reason.
Yes.
It's not something I necessarily want to see in Star Wars, but it's fine. Yeah,
it is what it is. Again, it's cool that it's not always about. It doesn't have to always be about me.
No, exactly. And they're catering to a huge audience, and there has to be something for everyone. And
correct.
All of our boxes don't have to be ticked.
Correct.
And there are other things that we don't necessarily care about, which if they happen, they happen. And this is one of them, to be honest.
Right.
That's how I felt about it.
Yeah, I agree. Anything else? I feel like I've said everything I need to say about this.
Yeah,
one.
no, I think so. Just your point about the Emmy before, about the fighting. I think last week's episode also deserves an Emmy for the fighting. So I think the series deserves 2 Emmys, one for episode 7 and one for episode 8 in terms of those sequences, because last week's was incredible too.
Agreed. Well, let's do 2 things. Let's give a letter grade for the episode, and let's give a letter grade for the entire first season.
So I'm going to give, based on the fact that this is the story of the Acolyte, I'm going to give the episode an A, because it did what it set out to do. It did everything that it set out to do. It was, by mere virtue that the series is called The Acolyte and this episode is called The Acolyte, it ticked it, it did it. Yes, I'm uncomfortable too, but I think I understand the direction that Leslie Headland wanted to take the series, which is incredibly brave because no one's ever done it before. But I think what she set out to do has been achieved, and we're seeing the story of the Sith and their rise across the galaxy. It's not something we want to see or we're particularly happy about, but she's doing it. And for the most part, I'm happy with the journey that we've gone on. Yes, there's been issues, but anyway, your grade. Sorry.
I love that you've really helped me a lot with this, your comments today. So thank you. I agree. It's an A. It's not, I'm trying to be objective here. Mm-hmm. The way it was told, all the things we've gotten from the beginning, if my beef was always that the story is told inconsistently or it didn't work, here it worked. Mm-hmm. Here it worked. It's a good lesson, and you can't really truly evaluate something until you've got the entire piece, until you've got all the jigsaw puzzle pieces, and we've got them all. What she was trying to do, what the mission was, keeping in mind it is told from the perspective of evil. And this one, evil wins. I'm uncomfortable with that.
Yep.
I think everyone, I would assume that is the direction of what it's supposed to do. It was very bold, as you said. And while the narrative was very flawed, this one, I don't know that you could find too many quibbles with. While I don't agree or appreciate the direction of some of the characters, and I just am heartbroken by what happened with Soul and how his legacy will be viewed historically from the Senate's point of view and from the Jedi's historical point of view. He is the greatest tragedy in Jedi lore to me because he doesn't get a chance to be redeemed. And that's hard for me. So I give this episode an A. But now the harder question: how do you rank the whole series? What letter would you give the whole series?
Well, I was just thinking of an analogy. It's just come to me.
Okay.
Avengers, Endgame, the snap.
Mm-hmm.
We all walked out of that cinema in shock.
Mm-hmm.
The snaps happened. Half of our heroes have been killed.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that everything was going to be okay, or we hoped everything was going to be okay. But a lot of us left that cinema feeling really dejected.
Yeah.
Because half of our heroes have just been killed. This is, for me, if you can compare this series to that Avengers film, if you like.
Infinity War versus Endgame.
Yeah. Because we're all feeling dejected. We're not happy with where it's going. We know that there's hope in the future. We know what happens in the future here. We don't know how necessarily yet the Sith rise, and we know that they do, because otherwise we wouldn't have Star Wars and we wouldn't have 9 episodes of the Skywalker saga.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, if I look at the whole series as being the story of the Acolyte and the resurgence of the Sith, or the Sith coming to the fore again after being away for a millennia,
Mm-hmm.
then the story for me has been told, and I like where we're going and I like what we're learning. I disagree. No, disagree strong. I don't like some of the narrative choices and how we've necessarily got there to this point. And when I spoke to Leslie last week, I talked about, did they think about telling episodes 3 and 7 first? And she said yes. That was something that they had thought about. They even thought about calling the first episode 4. So episode 1,
that's fun.
They talked about putting a title on as episode 4 so that we could go back and watch it in chronological order. So, and she said that yes, she felt that we would have more empathy for the Jedi if we'd watched it in a chronological order potentially. So it's something that they'd all played around with at Lucasfilm, and they didn't do it because they thought it would confuse too many people. And she then said, but this has confused many people too. So I don't think she could have necessarily won. But anyway, so I think for me, the whole series, I'm going to give it a B. I think it told the story of what she set out to do, but I think there's some room for improvement. I enjoyed it, so I'm going to give it a B.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is... yes.
Okay, I think that's very, very, very well said, very eloquent. I am, to no surprise, I'm just uncomfortable with how to proceed with this series. I will, of course, if there is a season 2, I will, of course, have to watch it because, hello, it's Star Wars, and I love this story. I love this saga. I don't love everything about it. I think that is something to embrace because, again, critical thinker, intellectual honesty. That will always be something that I will pilot my specifics, a YT 1300 light cruiser through. That will be always something that is important to me.
Absolutely.
I'm going to give the whole series a C-.
Okay.
Because of the inconsistent narrative structure that I feel like was in existence the entire time. I think if the ending wasn't as strong as it was, as far as not the story, but how the story was told, I would have ranked it much lower than a C-. But they nailed the landing, even though I am uncomfortable with the ending. I think it's okay to be uncomfortable with the ending. I hope that was the intent, because in this Star Wars story, the Acolyte, evil wins. Good does not prevail. corrupt people and lies and deceit win the day, and you kill those you love. Those are all messages that I don't think are portrayed as the way you're supposed to be, but it does come across to me as a somewhat cynical way to look at things. And Star Wars and cynicism are not a cocktail that I enjoy partaking in.
Okay.
Again, this is just my point of view. I'm not right. I could be a complete dope when it comes to that, and I'm fine with that. I will embrace my dopiness. I've never enjoyed not liking so many aspects of this. But what I did enjoy was the choreography, Michael Abel's music, the passion these actors, these creators brought to this production, the visuals, the fact that it got people talking. Look, I think it's okay that this is a polarizing series. I think it's okay that some people love it. Some people hate it. It's almost like the New York Yankees or Notre Dame football, or maybe even politics. People either love it or hate it. And I think that's cool. I like the dichotomy. I like the rhetoric. And I enjoy the conversation for it. So I think that will just about do it, James.
Well, I just one thing. My word that I chose, the two words that I chose was redemption and lies. Redemption really for the filmmakers, because I think that they pulled it off in the last episode. Yeah. I think had that not have been, then I agree, my rating would have been a lot less. Mm-hmm. But I do think that they managed to wrap up so many elements in this last episode. And I came away on one hand with a smile on my face, because I appreciated what they'd sort of set out to do. On the other hand, like you, I'm it's not necessarily a Star Wars story that I wanted to see told, but I appreciate why she wanted to tell it.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people that will want to see this side of the story. And I have to say kudos, because this was a really, really brave thing for her to do, because it was going to divide Star Wars fans. It was absolutely going to. Because Star Wars, as you keep saying, has always been based on hope, and we're telling the other story. And I think that's a really hard thing, and maybe that's why the series has been so divisive, because of that. But it's in the title.
That's right. It's in the title. So shame on me for not acknowledging that. One of the complaints about the book of Boba Fett was that there were some episodes that weren't even about Boba Fett. But I always said, look, if it's a book, then the different chapters don't always focus on the main character. So this was what they promised to tell us. They told us it's one of the only Star Wars stories I can remember that I don't feel like it was made for everyone. And again, it's brave, it's bold, and I think that's cool. It doesn't have to be for me. I think it's cool that it wasn't. I love that the fact that some people connected to it makes me so happy. It makes me so happy. I don't have to like everything that everyone likes. Everyone doesn't have to like what I like. I'm good with that. Absolutely at peace with that, 100%. Well, I'm also very much at peace. This is very bittersweet, though, because this is the last time we're going to talk weekly. Not in real life. Of course, you and I talk all the time.
Absolutely.
But it's been such a pleasure. One of the great perks of being a teacher is having summer off, and because the time changes so different in the United States and the UK, we're able to choreograph these and make them work beautifully. And I am so grateful for your friendship, for learning from you, and for your perspectives on not only the Acolyte, but Star Wars in general. So, James, thank you again so much for being on the show every week. And please let us know about Jedi News.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And again, it's been a true honor to do this together. And who knows what we'll do in the future when maybe season 2 or whatever else comes our way. We'll see.
That's right.
So
That's right.
Jedi News, your source for Star Wars. If you want Star Wars news, we've got it 24/7, 365 days of the year at JediNews.com. And on social media, you can find us by searching for Jedi News Network.
Please be sure to do so. You will not regret it. And I also hope that we have a massive, massive audience for CWK Live Tuesday, July 23rd will be the last CWK Live of this iteration of the show. Bring your top 5s to talk about the Acolyte's 8th episode of the Acolyte. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to the conversation. Continue to talk Star Wars and to bless this community with your insights, everyone. We love the conversation. Appreciate all of you and what you do. For myself and James Burns, thanks again so much, everybody. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.